Hey everybody, it's Brian. Before I did this Seahawks stuff full time, I worked as a manager and senior leader. So I know how lonely it can be to try to find someone you trust to talk through people issues, org issues, process issues as you try to lead an organization. Ryan Cleveland of RyanCleveland.com is someone I trust to have those conversations with. He specializes in working with CEOs and business owners, and you can get a complimentary free discovery session to see if it's a good fit for you. Just go to RyanCleveland.com to sign up and start now. Hello and welcome to another episode of Real Hawk Talk. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and now TikTok at Hawk Blogger. We're about 50 followers away from 1,000 on TikTok. My goal is to just blow that channel up just before it gets shut down. That's the goal, and you guys are going to help us do that. And I want to give a quick shout out to Will Hart, who's been creating all the shorts and reels for Instagram and YouTube and now TikTok, and has been doing great work. And really, really appreciate Will for all that he's been doing this season. But I think the real headline here is not the Seahawks. It is that we have two of our VIP co-hosts back with us after what seems like a little bit of a hiatus, especially Dayna O'Gorman, who's been traveling the world in every way possible, avoiding the Seahawks season wisely, I think, at Dayna OG on Twitter and on Blue Sky. Dayna, how are you doing? It's so good to see you.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad. December just has a tendency to get a little nutty for me. And so every year we plan a trip and I don't know why, but it's good. It works out for us. So it's been a while, but I'm excited. I've missed chatting with you guys, as I've told you in our group chat regularly. I'm like, I miss you guys. So I'm excited to kind of, even though it's the end of the season and not exactly where we wanted to be, there's still a lot to talk about. So
there is a lot to talk about. And Nathan Ernst has been a little bit more of a frequent guest and co-host for us, but has also been, very busy living life, and also maybe wisely picking things like family and other things over Seahawks games. How do you feel about your decision making so far on your Seahawks involvement this season, Nathan?
Well, sadly, I've actually been watching the games. I haven't been skipping the games. It's just hasn't super worked out for the podcast. So I've been doing the less fun half of it. So I guess, but it's been good. I mean, I don't know. You know how it gets with life sometimes and kids and everything.
I absolutely do. And, I am currently single parenting, and we'll see if my son decides to burn the house down while we're doing this. So you never know what's going to happen at this point. We'll see if the dog does. But I do want to ask something that has nothing to do with the Seahawks. It's 2025 now, which is wild. 25 years past 2000 just seems like futuristic to me. But what was your favorite book, movie, series that you watched last year? Watched or read? And it could be any of those things. It doesn't have to be all of them. But if there's something that stands out to you that you really enjoyed in 2025, I'd love to hear about it. Dayna, do you have an answer?
I do. Well, what you just said, it's been 25 years since 2000. 2000 is when I left Seattle. So that is a little wild to think I've been gone from Seattle for 25 years. That's a little crazy. I mean, I love Kansas City, don't get me wrong, but that's a long time. So, yeah. So we have been slightly obsessed with the show Silo. I don't know if you guys have watched that.
Okay. Yes.
It's so good. It's so good. I know it's on Apple TV or whatever, and people get all, but that and Shrinking have been just such wonderful surprises from last year. Books wise, I read a lot of biographies. So I've read Dave Grohl's book last year. I read just a bunch of stuff, but I, as the rest of the world, are currently obsessed with the book Let Them from Mel Robbins, who's like a self-help book. And
I know Mel Robbins, yeah.
Freaking amazing. And so I got that for Christmas and haven't put it down yet. So yeah, but if I had to say the biggest, best surprise, we really like Silo. So.
Interesting.
We're good. Yeah.
Nathan, what about you?
Yeah, this is an interesting question for me. We usually watch we don't do a ton of movies, but me and my wife watch a ton of different TV shows usually. And I'm trying to think, and I I don't know if 2025 or 2024 sucked for content, or I think we were just the year was a blur really. So I'll go with a really, really deep cut. We watched me and my friends watched a movie called Hundreds of Beavers. It's not what you think it is, Brian. So calm down.
No, I'm just like, no matter which direction this goes, it sounds interesting to me.
It's this like super tiny indie black and white weird movie, but it was a ton of fun. It probably helped that we did a whiskey tasting beforehand before we watched it. That really improved it. But yeah, I will go real deep cut on this one and say Hundreds of Beavers, because I don't know what I did the last year. It's lost track already.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. I have not seen it, so now I'll have to look for it. I think my vote, it's a tough one. I really liked Shogun. I thought that was excellent and like beautiful and just like wonderfully shot. I also I really liked this show Hysteria on Peacock. That was like a little bit like Stranger Things meets Poltergeist, like there's a little bit of cult, but it's 80s set, and there was something really fun about that series. I enjoyed that one. The finale was really stupid, but the rest of the series I enjoyed quite a bit. And it was one of those things where it didn't go, like you watch the whole first episode and it ends and you're like, what the hell just happened? Like, I thought it was this, and I was like, wait, what? So I really enjoyed that. But make sure, if you're in chat, let's hear your recommendations, your best of 2024 in terms of movies, books, or shows. All of those are fair game. So we've actually already got a super chat. We'll get to that in a little bit. It's been long enough that Dayna, I just need to know. Oh, sorry to interrupt. Brandon Meyer says Masters of the Air was good. That was a really good. I'm not a World War II aficionado, but that got me wow, that was amazing what they did. 100%. So, Dayna, where are you with the Seahawks? What's your mind? Where are you on the Seahawks team? This 9-7 Seahawks team that will not make the playoffs.
Well, first of all, thanks to everyone, because I'm writing down every single thing that everyone has said. So I'm excited for new shows. But, this year, I have to be honest, I got a lot of crap from you guys at the beginning of the season because I was not sold on the coaching staff. I wasn't quite sure where they were going. You guys were all in and I wasn't. And fun ribbing, not mean crap, obviously. But, it was fun. Believe it or not, this season kind of played out kind of how I thought it would. I believe on our sheet, I predicted an 8-win season, if I remember correctly, 8 or 9. It's kind of where we're right at. I figured we would have some up and downs, more than I would like, but there were lots of up and downs. But as I kind of come to the end of this, I have a lot of question marks still about Mike Macdonald. Not the same questions I had before, but different ones. The team, frustratingly, still seems to have the same issues that it's had for a long, long time now. But I'm not down on the season. And I, like you, Brian, was not so mad about that Chicago. I love that defensive game. It was so fun to watch. It was a little boring at times, but it was really good. I like the progression of the team. I did not expect them to make the playoffs. And if they did, I didn't expect them to win a game. And so I'm really okay and pretty settled with where they're at right now. And in that, I decided to go back with the question marks that I had. I decided to go back and watch a bunch of press conferences. I wanted to hone in on the coaching staff quite a bit. And I watched the very first, not the introductory, but the first preseason game, post-game press conference with Mike Macdonald. I watched about 10 today just to see how that kind of growth and change in his conversations with you guys and with the way he evaluated the team. There were some pretty big changes throughout the year, which to me is a good thing, right? That's what you want to see. You want to see growth. You want to see change. No, not all of it. He's not near as nice as he was at the beginning of the season. I'll tell you that. But I think where I'm at is I have a pretty positive for the most part, perspective going into next season, because they kind of ended up where I thought they might.
Interesting. Nathan, what about you? Where are you at? Because I think you kind of started maybe one of the most optimistic. I think you had we'll have a prediction response show and reaction to the season next week or soon after when we can get everyone together. But expectations for you are higher. Maybe that makes it harder. I don't know. How did that go for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm pretty frustrated that the whole idea behind firing Pete was to get out of this hamster wheel of mediocrity, and they are still firmly in the hamster wheel of mediocrity. There are bright spots that you can definitely point to. The defense, those season-wide, like overall season numbers and everything look really good, and it's a big step forward. But there are some pretty ugly warts within some of those bright spots. And obviously the offense, it's looking like firing Grubb is. I'm kind of torn on the Grubb thing, but it's looking more and more like that just kind of has to happen. And so there's still a lot of work to be done on this team. And it's kind of I didn't expect them to become Super Bowl contenders overnight. Like I picked them to go to the NFC Championship game. That was a little bit of having some fun with it. But it's frustrating that they still feel so far away. And there's not a lot of obvious ways for them to get better, I think.
Say more. There's not a lot of obvious ways for them to get better. Say more about what you're thinking there.
Their cap situation's not like completely opening up for them. They're not going to have a really high draft pick. They haven't made trades over the previous couple of years to stock up on draft picks. It's not that I guess, hey, what do they need to do to get better? Well, fix the offensive line. That's obvious. Not easy, especially with the way that Schneider has been doing this for years now. And so it's that kind of thing. What is the ammunition that they're going to use to go and make the jump? Because, for years, this team's goal was to get back to winning playoff games. So this should be a team that gets into the playoffs. And it's really hard to expect a team to win a Super Bowl, but you can expect to build a team that will win a playoff game or two. And we've only seen that we've only gone backwards from there. Now we're just hoping to get this team back in the playoffs at some point. But they're not any really better positioned from a roster building perspective than they've been. They've dug themselves holes in the past with things like the Jamal Adams trades, but they're not sitting on some abundance of oh yeah, they've got, they got a ton of powder that they can go use now in the draft or in this way or whatever. It's I don't know. It's just a lot of questions and they have hard decisions to make with Geno, I think, coming up and things like that. So the path to being a good football team is obvious, but how they get there is still pretty murky to me.
Yeah. I was kind of going through and looking at, I'll do a whole show on this probably, but looking at which teams had the best drafts last year. And Washington clearly with getting Jaden Daniels is just a home run draft, and they had some other good picks as well. I think the Packers, honestly, again, had one of the best drafts. Jordan Morgan, he got injured, but had a pretty good year. Javon Bullard has been a starter for them all year. Has been a pretty good player. Edge Cooper has been the best linebacker. Those are three, all guys drafted between pick 25 and pick 58. And even Evan Williams, who is a safety for them, picked in the fourth round, 111. I do wonder a little bit, as I've looked through this over the years, there's no doubt that having a top 10 pick is a huge, huge value. But increasingly, when I look at great draft classes, it's almost always that people hit on a fourth or fifth round pick, and that those fourth or fifth round picks end up being really good players. And so I do wonder to some extent how much we all focus, because John has been pretty bad at first round picks early in his career. I think the last three drafts have been pretty solid. I don't think you can really have a lot of quibbles with those. But where you really are looking at is When's the last time a 5th round pick was Richard Sherman or Cam Chancellor, or a 4th round pick was KJ Wright, a 6th round pick was Byron Maxwell, that kind of thing. And I think you'd say Reek Woolen was a 5th round pick, 2021. Mm-hmm. That's a good example. You need more of those. And so that's where I do wonder the draft capital thing. It absolutely matters. The Seahawks had 2 first-round picks last year or 2 years ago. They had a top 10 pick the year before that. They had 2 second-round picks in back-to-back years. They're not going to have that. So I do think that matters, but I am kind of curious if some of this becomes more interesting with a new coaching staff that is now fused a little bit better with the front office. And again, this is not me like countering it. It's just like my thought process right now, which is what's one of the better picks that the Seahawks had this year? Maybe the most successful pick that the Seahawks had this year was Tyrese Knight in the 4th round. And that was a Mike McDonald pick. And I just want to wonder if and AJ Barner is probably another one of the more successful picks. Also probably Mike McDonald influenced potentially. So I'm kind of curious if that meshing will affect the draft quality in some of those later rounds.
The other thing about it, though, is it's not just if this team finds KJ Wright in the 4th round again, that's good. I mean, I'd be real happy with that. They have to find, I don't know who the 4th round equivalent of guard. I don't think that guy exists. They need to find it at certain positions, because this team's not just trying to go from the 2009 Seahawks to the 2010 Seahawks. They're trying to go from, 2011 or 2012, right? They're trying to get into that 2012, 2013 range. And so you have to start marrying position with player here too in the draft. And but no, I mean, you're totally right. It's not it's also not super complicated, right? Just draft good players. But again, a little easier said than done.
Well, we'll come back to that, Dayna. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say that this was one of the things I was optimistic about when they hired Mike McDonald. And the reason why is because when Pete Carroll was drafting so well early in his career, it's because he had just been in the college ranks. He knew those players. He'd watched those players. He had tried to recruit those players. And so I was hoping that Mike McDonald, just being 1 or 2 years removed from being at Michigan and being with those players, that he would have a better feel of some of those later round guys, not the super splashy guys in the 1st round, but those later round guys. And Knight might be a perfect example. He knew him from watching him or play, against him just a couple of years prior. So that was one of my hopes, is that hopefully some of those deeper round guys would be better because he would have been closer to the college level. I think sometimes when coaches, as maybe Pete proved, the further you get away from that, the harder it is to really know kind of those deep trenches guys.
I think that's a great point, Dayna. Mm-hmm. And I will forever believe, and probably forever be debated, that it was Pete Carroll's advantage in college of knowing those players that helped early on more than it was Scott McLuhan, who everyone else has decided was the scout whisperer. But in any event, Nathan, I want to come back to the point you made, because I kind of ping pong back and forth on this, which is the point that I heard you make, which is, all right, there's some kind of bonus of being a really shitty team and having a bad roster, because you're okay, we can really take the best player available and we've got a spot for that guy and he can compete to start and get snaps right away. And so it's almost easier to have a 2010 Seahawks roster and be yep, Earl Thomas, Golden Tate, Cam Chancellor, all of you, great. But then the other thing is, okay, there's a bonus of, the Seahawks have spent the bulk of their draft capital and the bulk of their free agent dollars on defense over the last 3 seasons. The defense is now young, and trade capital, by the way, all of it, primarily on defense. Defense is now young. It's now top 10 by almost any measure. And it should be better next year, because they'll not have to spend the offseason just learning what they've already spent their time doing this year. So logically, they should also be able to focus on offense, and they should be able to address. And offensive line is very obviously where they should spend thing. So that's the other thing. And then I ping pong back to the other side. It's Oh, yeah. How often have we drafted and acquired good offensive linemen? So, like, this is going to be the thing. But I will just put out there the idea that people think that John Schneider's not going to prioritize interior offensive line. I think that is just fan frustration. I think he will 100% do something that he has not done before because it is so obvious that that's what needs to be done. I just don't think there's any way he can approach this offseason and say, interior offensive line is the last priority. I just don't believe it. Maybe I'll be wrong, but that's where I'm at.
Him, he's never approached it that way, right? I think who had the comments that it's not that they don't prioritize offensive linemen, it's that other teams are just prioritizing them even more than we do, right? Wasn't that the response to the overdrafted, overpaid thing with the guards, or was that somebody? I don't
think the what I've heard from the team is not that other teams value them more. I think that's another way to interpret it, but that's not how they would have, I think, thought about it. It's that there are other positions that they value more, that if they had to choose, for example, the choice this year would have been, would you rather have Leonard Williams at $21.5 million, or would you rather have Damian Lewis at 12 or 13 or 14, whatever he made million, or Jonah Jackson at 15 million? And their point would be, you're getting a much lesser player at a lesser positional value. And so that's not a good way to build a roster. And I think that there's some validity to that, but that leads you down a path where you potentially just have this big hole.
Well, and I mean, I think the argument a lot of people make, what I would argue is it's a false dichotomy. It wasn't Leonard Williams or Damian Lewis. Like, you could say it was Damian Lewis or Pharaoh Brown and, 6 other $2 million guys that, half of them they've cut or traded or whatever by now. So like, Nick Harris and the linebackers, like all those types of guys, so yeah, I mean, even if Schneider goes into this thinking, oh yeah, it's obvious now, is he actually going to, because those patterns too, like them just kind of nickel and diming themselves in free agency on the Pharaoh Browns of the world. That's an old problem too. So like they're going to have to really change some stuff if they want to actually address it.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Because we could easily end up in this position, at the end of free agency next year, where we're saying, well, it was Ernest Jones or that guard you wanted, and because they got to pay this dude now, right? Like, there's always some dude you have to pay. At some point, you actually just have to put it into the offensive line. Yeah.
I'm willing to wager. And we'll look at it, but I'm willing to wager that they're gonna invest in a free agent offensive guard. That's that's not a report. I'm not saying that from a source. I'm just saying that based off my read of the team, the need, and their history when they identify like there's just a clear area. I think there's also some good opportunity to sign free agent offensive guards. So we'll see. Dayna, Tyler Lockett, we talked to him today. This may be his last game as a Seahawk coming up. He said that he wants to play. He said this for a couple times, but he said it in his press conference today. He wants to play again next year. He hopes it's here, but he knows that it's not his choice to decide that. Where are you at on Tyler Lockett? Do you hope that they bring him back? Do you hope that maybe they move on and get a little bit of a younger option in there?
Can you remind me what his cap hit will be next year? Because it jumps, doesn't it? Pretty big.
It's like $30 million.
So that would have to change, obviously, right? Sure. Like we can't play
that
Tyler.
That's a must.
Yeah. At that point, here's my internal struggle with the whole wide receiver room, right? Obviously, JSN has stepped up. He's done exactly what they wanted him to do. He's going to be wide receiver number 1. With the whole trade DK and get rid of Tyler argument, I struggle with. And the reason why is because I don't know how much of that was their issue or how much of it was the offensive play calling and grub and that issue, right? Because I'm sorry, this is not the season we expected. You guys remember very well at the beginning of the season, we talked about how the wide receivers were not what we were worried about. We were not worried about this offense in any way, shape, or form, and it has become the Achilles heel of this team. And so what happens then? So do we then get rid of DK, trade him out? Do we get rid of Tyler, start over from scratch? but with a whole new offensive coordinator. Do God forbid we keep Grubb, which is not something I want. And then keep those wide receivers. Tyler, one more year. He wants to play one more year, then he's done. So do we just let him finish his career here at a much reduced price? That's where I struggle. I understand the trade DK conversation. I do. I feel like I understand less getting rid of Tyler if his price tag comes way down. If he's not willing to budge on the price, then of course he's made his own decision, right? At that point, that you just can't pay him for his production at that level. But my push-pull, as you guys have talked about on the other things, is who do we lay the blame there at? Because Tyler does certain things that are very helpful. And if he's okay with the role he played this year at the price that he deserves to be paid for the role he played this year, then yeah, you keep him. DK is a whole different conversation. I think that one's tougher, but.
So where do you land? You say you keep Tyler if you can get him at the right price, and DK you do.
Yep. If he truly just wants one more year and he'll bring his price way down, then yeah, I'd say you keep Tyler, let him retire, Seahawk. That's a fan thing. That would be fine. DK is harder for me because, as I told you guys in chat, I'm not convinced that Tyler or that DK wants to be here. And I just, and that's, again, not anything I've heard or been told. It's just literally a gut feeling in his demeanor this year. I like a feisty player, so him fighting with the players on the field, I love. I don't mind that at all. I missed that from this team. I love that kind of fire. I know it ends up hurting the team. Well, if the team was really good, you wouldn't be mine if he hurt you every once in a while, right? But I like that fire out of him. And yet, he does not seem engaged in this offense. Is that a Grubb issue? Is that a DK issue? I don't know. Would he be happier somewhere else? I don't know. So that's the assessment I think needs to be done with DK within, the front office and the coaching staff. Is this something you're willing to put 100% into and be okay with having the secondary role, as JSN has obviously stepped up to one? Or would you be happier somewhere else? And is that where you need to go? I personally believe if you have any question about him wanting to be here, trade him, get some value out of him. You're not going to get a ton, but get what you can out of him. If there's any question of whether or not he's all in for Seattle.
Nathan, one of the things that Tyler said today was he was asked, what does he feel like his best contribution was this year? And he said his biggest contribution was sacrifice. Mm-hmm. And I tweeted that out. I thought it was a great quote. Mm-hmm. The reactions to it have been really surprising to me. A lot of people are like, that's a weird thing to say. And that's like something Russell would say, or like I've seen like a lot of weird, like negative responses to that. I thought it was a really mature recognition of him not demanding more of the ball, of the attention, being willing to do whatever he's asked is a meaningful way to contribute to the team. And part of the reason I'm focusing on that, I'm interested in your thoughts just in general on that, but also the underrated part of Tyler Lockett being on the team is JSN can get 150 targets or whatever, and DK can get all the other targets. And if you want to get a tight end more targets, like Lockett will play his part. If you get someone else, it's potentially they're going to be looking for a little bit more of the love. So like, what do you think is best for the Seahawks to get a young player that might have more, ability to create offense for the team right now? Or do you think one more year of Tyler Lockett at the right price would make sense?
I mean, I think another year of Tyler at the right price makes sense. I think it's undeniable. So the sacrifice comment, it is kind of interesting to me. It does strike me I see the way that you're saying that, and I think it's a fair read of it. But when you make a comment like that, you're also you're making a point too, that like, hey, I was better than this. Like, this wasn't because of me. This was because of other people. And now, who's to say how much ill will there is behind that? I would guess if we're talking about sacrificing for JSN, he probably has less ill will than if we're maybe talking about sacrifices he made for the scheme and the new offensive coordinator. Maybe there's more ill will, right? Just guessing. And so I do think that the sacrifice comment is pretty, like, there is a little something, a little, I don't know, toxic the right word, but there's a little upset behind that, I would guess. But no, I think if you look at the needs of this team, you don't want them having you don't want to try to go find another first round wide receiver for this team. I don't think that makes a lot of sense.
That's kind of a bold statement.
Really, we think we need a first round? That's the problem to solve with this team?
I'm not saying you do. I think that you could make the case that if there's a quality receiver, that's a positional value. And if you were to add a really dangerous third receiver, that could be a really valuable thing to do. Doesn't mean, I think everyone just assumes you have to draft a guard in the first round. I don't think that's the only way that you can get a guard. What's that?
You could draft a tackle and move them to guard.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be a guard.
There's a few that fit that bill for sure.
Yeah. I do think it has to be an offensive lineman. Like if you're serious about fixing what's wrong with this team, you have to draft an offensive lineman in the first round. There are obviously, I haven't deeply studied the draft. I don't know
yep.
That has to be the idea. We are drafting an offensive lineman in the first round, or
let me challenge that for a second. We'll have a lot more fun with this in the off season, but is the thing that the youngest, I haven't done the final research on this, but I think this is the youngest offensive line in the NFL, the Seahawks. Is what they need another rookie starter, even if it's a first round pick, or do they need one of the pretty darn good veteran free agents? Like, do you need a Kevin Zeitler? I'm not saying that that's who they're going to get, but if you could plug in someone of his quality and his experience, is that a better fix immediately for this line? I'm much more for the latter.
Without having looked at the free agent class much, I think the team needs to actually invest in the offensive line as a unit that will stay together for a period of time. This isn't a team that just needs to go plug and play a veteran guard who'll be here for a year or two. We've also, I need to divorce this from John Schneider too, because they'll end up, because when you say that too, the other thing I'm thinking about, Luke Jokel or something like that, is who they'll end up grabbing. But so no, I think they got to get serious about it. Go get an offensive lineman, spend high draft capital, keep a group together for multiple years together, benefit from having a cheap offensive line. I think the draft is much preferred for me. Go ahead, Dayna.
I was just going to ask, is there a lot of free agent offensive linemen? Because I've always been told that offensive linemen in college aren't being developed properly for the NFL right now. And so the free agents are just worth so much if, they're good. I don't even know how many free agents are out there this year, because honestly, they're going to have to pay a lot of players right now. And so it's is that going to be that's going to be crazy.
There are. We'll do a more deep dive on that, but there are some definitely interesting guards out there in this class. My personal one that I'm fixated on is James Daniels of Pittsburgh, who's going to be coming off an ACL injury. So that's the downside. But he's a 27-year-old physical Pittsburgh Steeler offensive guard. And I think that's the right age. I think it'll be the right price. And I think it's the right upside. But there's other guys. I like Will Hernandez quite a bit. I don't know if he'll probably get re-signed. I think Nate Herbig, who's also a Steelers guard, 26 years old. Mekhi Becton is 26. He's an Eagle. He's an interesting player. So there are some names. There are some names. You're going to have to spend money, but I don't think you're going to have to spend $20 million a year kind of money. Anyway, this is the debate we're going to have so much fun with this offseason. At least I'm going to have fun with. But no doubt, they need to invest their top capital in addressing the offensive line. There's no doubt.
Going back to Tyler, though,
yes.
I don't hate the idea of drafting a wide receiver early-ish, but having Tyler as a hedge so that you don't feel like you suddenly do have to draft a first-round wide receiver. Because if Tyler's not there, then yes, you start to have to seriously think it wouldn't be terrible value to get a wide receiver 3 using a first-round pick, especially with everything else that might be going on. DK is going to start costing a lot of money and some of that stuff. And so just Tyler as a hedge, I think there's a lot of value there. And I do think he has he as a, a third wide receiver, as a glue guy, as a Bobby Ingram type, right? Like he can be a valuable player still.
I think I'm okay with that, partially because I've also looked at the receiver class. This is a shitty receiver class, and I don't want to like go sign. Like, I'd much rather have Tyler for another year than sign some veteran free agent. Like, that's stupid. So if there was a young receiver that I thought just fit, and there's maybe some later round guys, but this is not the wide receiver draft that the last few have been. Even the guys that are first round picks are kind of like possession-y receiver kind of guys. They're not, I don't think, big time difference makers. Part of what's going to matter for all of this is we also got to talk to Ryan Grubb today. And Dayna, you kind of were talking about this a bit, and Nathan, I'd love to get your reactions, but I've been pretty, I think, out in front a little bit. I would say I'm out over my skis. I will say that, in that I've been questioning whether Ryan Grubb's going to be back since week 9 or so. And now I think it's an open question. And I think a lot of Seahawks fans are like not happy with him. He mentioned today, he knows that, he's frustrated. And I thought he was really clever the way he said, he's like, I'm sure a lot of Seahawks fans share my frustration. And I asked him, do you think Satao Lamea is done enough to earn a chance to compete for the starting position next year? And he said, yes. I said, what do you think about Christian Haynes taking snaps at center? Is that a position you think he could potentially compete for next year? And he said, yes. And he was asked about getting involved in the offseason, personnel, and talked about it. And he talked about the things that he wanted to change. I still think he's going. Nathan, where are you on this?
When this stuff really started to heat up, like you said, kind of around midseason or earlier on, I got mad about it, and I was like, it would be so stupid to hire a first year and like offensive coordinator in the NFL and then just fire him. Like, especially when there was even talk about like a season fire. I'm like, why are you going and getting a guy who's never coached in the NFL and then not giving him any time to actually figure it out? Like, what are you doing? But it's gotten the thing that is really concerning to me is it feels like it's getting worse. And that's obviously easy to say after they score 3 or 6 points in a game. But I don't see him figuring it out. I don't like, there's not, you go back to how they looked at the start of the year, even when, especially with the offensive line looking a lot worse in the start of the year. And it's just continued to like unravel and get away from him. And so it almost, it's just kind of feels like you have to, like it feels like, I don't know where, obviously if you're working with him day in, day out, you're in the building, you have a much better understanding of this, but like, I don't have optimism that like, oh yeah, year 2, suddenly it gets so much better with him, because he's just seemed to get stumped more and more by all the different problems that the NFL has thrown at him.
Dayna, what's your thoughts?
Very similar to that. So the interesting thing is, obviously everyone talked about the lack of the run game, right? When your number one runner only has 500 yards, that's a problem, right? And the fact that it was brought up, and then the next game they ran the ball forever. It's like, oh, because someone told you to. Why didn't we figure this out before? It seemed very disjointed to me. When I would watch the offense, it felt panicky. It felt reactionary instead of a plan, right? And I expected that at the beginning. You expect him to kind of roll into it, settle into it. I don't feel like he ever settled into it. I feel like the NFL confused him, for lack of a better word. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful. You guys watched him when he was in college. I'm sure he's very good at his job. I just don't know that this pace or this necessarily set of circumstances, or maybe the coaching staff that's around him, fits what he wants to do. I don't certainly know that it doesn't fit what Seattle wants to do, right? And so it makes me really feel like, I don't want to say he's out of his depth. I just don't know that he's in the proper place where he needs to be, because I'm really trying to not be disrespectful. It just was not complimentary football. It just really seemed to lack. I'm going to sound like I'm being a bitch, and I'm not trying to be a bitch. It sounded like, it felt like it lacked NFL level, kind of comprehension. It just wasn't to the point where you could make in-game adjustments, adjust to what these defenses were throwing at you fast enough. And we were used to really good second half adjustments, right? And that just didn't happen. You saw it in defense, though. We knew the defense would make these adjustments. You just weren't getting, as the game went, it got more and more frantic, and I just hated that. So not loving offense anyway, it was just really hard to watch. So while I'm not a fan of firing a coach after 1 year, I don't think that that's always fair. It just doesn't feel like this is the place for him. And it would feel like Seattle was saying, or the front office was saying, we're okay with the product that was on the field this year if they keep him. So
I think that a lot of that's fair. I have such a complex relationship with this question because I literally will argue with folks who I will spare their names, who think Ryan Grubb is the worst and like that he is the whole problem and that he has ruined this team. I don't feel that way at all. I really, really don't. And I could make a pretty good case, I think, that he's done a decent job with some pretty challenging circumstances and that he will almost certainly be meaningfully better in year two. Like, I could make that whole case. I'm not going to do that now. At the same time, I don't think it makes sense for him to come back, given where there seems to be some philosophical mismatches with the head coach. And if you're wrong, I think it's okay to be wrong on the hire. It's not great, but you didn't have a lot of choices. It was late in the cycle. You kind of go with what you know and you hope it works out. If you get that wrong, fine. If you bring him back, that's your career too. Like, because now you'll be 2 years into that system. You'll have had that much more of the players invested in that. And if you're wrong then, so like if you're going to tear off the Band-Aid, you got to do it this offseason. And we'll find out potentially next week, right? Like, do you guys remember how Shoddy got let go?
I don't remember the exact days, but I remember Pete saying he's back and then Pete saying we're fired him.
Right? It was weird, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's one of the weirdest firings since we've been doing this, isn't it? Like, maybe like it's not shocking, but didn't they have like a top 10 offense that year?
That was after that was the let Russ cook year, right? So they were incredible for half the year, then it fell apart. And then Pete comes out and says he's back.
Fired Seahawks. That happened in January 2021. So it's after the 2020 season, and the Seahawks in 2020. Let me just do this real quick. I know no one else really cares about this, but I'm curious. 2020 Seahawks finished 8th in scoring. I think that was a franchise record. They scored 28.7 points per game. Mm-hmm. And they were 15th in yards. 3rd in passing touchdowns, 6th in yards per rush, 12th in rushing yards. It was weird. Like, it was weird.
I mean, I think people were wondering, like, what is going to happen? Because, like, that was such a tale of two halves, right? Like, they were far and away the best offense for, like, 8 weeks.
That's true.
And then, like, that was, like, they couldn't beat Colt McCoy. They, like, it just absolutely crumbled on them. Was that the year that they lost to Wofford and what's the dude?
Wolford and the Rams in the postseason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was definitely what's gonna happen now, but then Pete's like, nope, all good, and then the next day was like, whoops, actually.
It's weird. That was weird. Anyway, so I am kind of I'm morbidly interested, curious about how that's going to play out. And we've got this question on super chat from Jacoby says, after the Ryan Grubb press conference, do you still see Coach Grubb being a part of staff in 2025? I think we've all three answered we don't think so, right? Mm-hmm. Is that where we're all at?
I really don't know.
So.
But
you don't know. That's a great take, Nathan. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I lean that he will be gone.
I have a question for you guys then.
Okay.
So let's say they do decide to keep him. What other changes then have to happen in order to make basically the fan base okay with that? Do they have to bail on DK, get rid of everyone, start over from scratch? Whatever it may be,
fan
because
base won't be okay with it.
I don't see how they make it right. That's my whole point. Yeah.
Nothing that they do this offseason on offense is going to make the fan base happy, except throw a ton of draft capital or money at offensive line. That's the only thing that will make people happy, because half the people want Grubb gone. I'm sure there's a group of people that don't care. Half the people want Geno to stay. Half the people want Geno to go. Half the people want DK to go. No matter what they do, just like people are going to be pissed. So they better just get it right, invest in the offensive line, and then week 1 score 40 points. Like that's going to fix the problem.
Perfectly said, Nathan. It cannot, if they're going to try to do this based off of fan perception, they're already losing. So,
and they never have, right? So we don't expect them to do that. Well,
I think it does enter into things. I think it's a fair thing. I guess I'm just saying, if they're going to go with Grubb, I think if they really just want the freshest start, they go with a new OC and they invest in the offensive line. That is probably the straightest path to getting fans bought in to what's going on. If they keep Grubb, there's going to be a lot of skepticism, and they will 100% have to nail the offensive line, and he will have to really nail his offseason. I happen to think that's one of the things he can do. He's super smart. He is a hard worker. I think he would spend the whole offseason really figuring out how to improve what he did. But understand, that would still be new. Like, that's him developing his NFL offense as opposed to coming in with it. Whether that's better than someone else's cast off as an OC, don't know. Yeah. But that's what would have to happen.
There's a couple comments in the chat that were interesting. Like, one person asked, can you get a mentor for a coordinator in the NFL? Is that a thing that happens? I mean, that's what Leslie Frazier is for Mike McDonald as the head coach right now. Like, I think pretty clearly, right? And probably for Dirty as well, right? That's the whole point of Leslie Frazier. So if they keep Grubb, they absolutely could go find somebody that maybe has some connection to him, that has some kind of veteran presence, and give him some, random analyst or whatever role. And I think that would be something for deep cut fans that may pacify some folks. Obviously, most fans aren't going to care if you bring in, I don't know, Greg Olson or something.
Tom Cable.
Sure. Well, okay. That might not pacify the deep cut fans very much. But then, somebody else asked, like, how do you know if, like, how can you say that Grubb's not going to get better in year 2? And the thing that really worries me is, like I said, I think he has gotten progressively worse as the year has gone on. And, like, he is not going to go into the offseason. I mean, who knows? Like, maybe he'll find 2025 is read option or something like that. But he's not going to go into the offseason and create some new scheme that solves the NFL, right? Like, there's nothing new under the sun in
I think it's a lot simpler than that, though. Like, yeah. Here's the like simplest quick narrative I've got. He is passing oriented. He's explosive. He's shotgun oriented. That was working early on. They had the personnel to take advantage of it. Teams then were like, nope, not going to have you do that. And they don't have a run game to go to. And it took them all the season to get to the point where they had a credible run game. They now have close to what I would call as a credible run game. If the only thing that's different next year is that they have a credible run game from the jump and they're able to integrate that, then I think that they have a passable NFL offense without having to change a whole bunch.
But why aren't we seeing that then? Because they do have the credible run game now. He's had weeks to, and I don't expect him to completely change everything, right? Like structurally, the pros and cons are not going to fundamentally change for his offense. And in an offseason, maybe he can work towards addressing more of that. But why is it getting worse, not getting better?
I don't think that's even quite true. Like the Arizona game was only a couple games ago, and that wasn't progressively worse. That was that was probably the best offensive game of the season. 3rd and 3 against Chicago in like the second quarter, they go empty set, 4 verts. Like, dude, what the hell are you doing? This last game, I think I will continue to say, if anyone's using the last game as evidence for or against almost anything, I think that game just gets thrown out the door. The same way that Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan get passed for their 12-6 touchdown free Thursday night game in the rain a few weeks ago. And I will point out, Sean McVay's offense going to the playoffs, mastermind, averaging fewer points, fewer yards than Ryan Grubb's offense. If you look at play caller metrics, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan are below Ryan Grubb in those rankings. I'm just saying, like, offense is pretty shitty across the NFL this year.
Yeah, for sure. Teams in general are absolute crap this year.
Other than Detroit.
Well, yeah.
And Minnesota.
Let's know on those McVay numbers, like pre Puka and Cooper and post Puka and Cooper.
Did you just watch them against Arizona in a game that mattered?
Yeah, I know. But like I'm
just saying, like, that's the last game. They needed that game at home in no weather at all. They scored 13 points, and really they scored 10 because the refs didn't review a play that shouldn't have ever been a first down. They had everybody for that game.
I don't know. I think the trend with Grubb, though, going back to Grubb, like the trend with McVay, still pretty strong. The trend with Grubb in a very short trend line here, but it's pointed down, and that's the concern for me. I think that's generally fair. Like he's learning.
I was quibbling with a couple little things just for fun, but I generally get it. A couple quick super chats that relate to this, and then we'll get to patron questions. Dogzilla really wanted to make sure we knew that Grubb was optimistic about his future today. Grubb sounded confident today about his future, and that this philosophical difference is a media fantasy. I'm just making it up. Don't trust this Nemhauser guy. All right. Thank you. We got some other super chats. Oh, wait. There's one other that's related to this. Jordan says, what OC looks good under these circumstances, even with experience? Defense adjustments came after we traded for EJ. I don't think it's as easy to say Grubb can't adjust. I think that's a great point, Jordan. McDonald was struggling on defense. We think he's really good, and they've made a massive turnaround, and he got a lot of personnel help to have that happen. Ryan Grubb got 0 personnel help. In fact, he got attrition for the most part. So fair. All right, Dayna, let's get to patron questions. If folks haven't signed up at patreon.com/hawkblogger, please do. We always appreciate your support. You get access to the Slack channel, and you get to ask us questions each and every week. What do we got this week, Dayna?
So there's not a ton. There's just 4 this week, but they're pretty good. So this one is from Amy. It says, do you think it matters who the 2025 OC for what they do at quarterback or other offensive positions? In my mind, it would make sense to decide that first, then work with the OC to pull together what's needed and decide what should go. So I think what I'm reading there is, what is more important? Do you decide OC first, or do you deal with the wide receiver quarterback situation first? Nathan.
Sorry, I was distracted.
Brian.
I feel like I'm going to restate the question for Nathan because I've already answered a similar question in a previous show.
Fair enough.
Basically, do you think that they should make the OC decision first, Nathan, and then figure out what to do with some of these players like Geno and DK, or do you think that those are independent?
I would make the OC decision first, for sure. You got to make sure that, whatever scheme you're bringing in here, that you've got the right pieces for it. And so depending, if you go find, like there are definitely offenses that DK fits better and worse in. And so making sure you know what you're actually running before you make a decision on him is important.
All right. So let's do the other OC question. This is from Cindy. It says, Brian, are you picking up any vibes on how the players on offense feel about Grubb? I don't hear the players singing his praises the same way the defense does for Mike.
I wanted to ask that question too, actually.
It's really hard to say. I mean, the offense is struggling. I don't think anybody's particularly excited about the way things are going on offense. And we talked to Julian Love today, and part of the question was for him on defense, like what do you think helps people buy in? And he's like, well, we were 3-0 early, and we were like number one in the NFL in a lot of defensive things, so people feel a little bit more bought in. If you take that and you apply it to the offense, maybe there's some early buy-in, but it's been to Nathan's point, it's been a very rough second half. And I don't think it's realistic to expect people to be super excited about the Ryan Grubb offense. At the same time, Gino spent a lot of time today talking about how much time he spent with Ryan Grubb, how much, he respects the work he's done. I think DK at times has said some positive things. I asked Tyler Lockett today a little bit about what the offense needs to do next. His answer was really interesting, and maybe I'll play it on another show, but like, long answer made a little bit longer. I'll just say I can't see any player being super bought into what's happening on offense. And I don't think it has to do with who Ryan Grubb is. I think it's just not working.
The way it worked out. Yeah, I would think if one player could, maybe JSN, right? Because he's had an amazing season, and this has worked well for him. I'm not sure that wouldn't have happened anyway, even if it wasn't a Ryan Grubb offense, for sure.
I do feel, though, that, or if I remember right, your answer to this question was different when it was earlier in the season and the defense stunk, and it still seemed like the players liked Mike.
It's also a little bit of a different dynamic when it's the head coach who can hire, fire you and has total control. I was reacting back then. This was like week 5 where people were saying they should fire Mike McDonald. They really were. Yeah. And the people were passing the rumor around that there's a toxic locker room, and I'm like, I'm in that locker room every week, multiple times a day. If this is what a toxic locker room looks like, then the NFL really is a dream job, because everyone seems pretty darn happy and engaged, and they come off the field and they're making fun of Mike McDonald while he's in his press conference, and they're jabbering stuff that does not seem toxic. Grubb, they're in training camp, they were describe Grubb's offense. It's explosive. We can't wait to we're doing some things that you haven't seen in the NFL before. And there was that kind of talk, and it was doing pretty well on the field, practice field. And then it did reasonably well to start the season. It was up until week 8, it was a top 12 offense. People forget. But it's been really rough. So I don't know. I think things have gotten barren.
Mm-hmm. All right. So 2 more questions. This one's from Jordan. It says, Adam Schefter reported today that he expects the Vikings to get calls from teams for JJ McCarthy, with the expected compensation to be a first and then some. Although anything is unlikely to play out, do you expect Seattle to be in that conversation? And if not, should they be? P.S. Happy New Year to the crew. It says, thanks for a great 24 with all the insightful, entertaining Seahawks content as usual. Here's to a great 25. Thanks, Jordan. So, JJ McCarthy, Nathan, in or out?
Well, John is proactive nonstop. He's in on every deal. He's talking to every team about every player. So I'm sure they've had the conversation. It feels like a weird, I don't know. As I was going to say, it feels like a weird thing for them to do, but that's kind of their thing sometimes, is to come at things from a weird direction.
Can I ask you a different way to ask this question? Where would JJ McCarthy rank among the quarterbacks in this class?
Oh, number 1, I think.
Probably.
Yeah, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
How would you know? He didn't play a single down.
Based on his time in Michigan.
But we also thought that with Bryce Young, right? So
Bryce Young win number 1
it's just
overall.
a really bad quarterback class.
And how did it look?
Dayna.
I understand that. No, I'm giving you guys a bad time.
Thing.
I am, but yeah, I get real nervous
coming
about
from
giving
somebody
a
who's
one.
not a fan of McCarthy. I'm not a big McCarthy guy at all. I was like 100% anti him last year. I still think he'd probably be the best prospect in this class because I think this class is terrible.
Oh, you mean this? I thought you meant from last year's class when he was drafted. I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
No.
This year, yeah, I think you're probably right.
I mean, Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders are like the guys. I don't even know if they go back into the first round last year.
Yeah.
They probably go top 5 this year, top 3.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I would hate it, but...
Would you, though? I'm curious. You'd hate it. I want to hear a little bit more about that.
Paying a premium to go get JJ McCarthy with all the other and I'm in the I think it's time to find a new quarterback group. I like Geno. I still think Geno is a good quarterback. I don't think he's the guy that's going to return them to the promised land. The combination of just some of the absolute stupidest interceptions, and I know there's a million, Griff's got a million excuses for it. And a lot of them are good. They're solid. But I kind of can't anymore with the Geno hope. But so even then, JJ McCarthy is not the guy that I'm like, yeah, man, go give up a couple first round picks to go get that dude. That's not the move, I don't think.
Can I say I'm not in the Geno hope. I'm in the Geno hedge. Seriously, when you look at the other, options that are out there, especially with this rookie class coming out, right? I wouldn't give up Geno for any of them, to be honest with you. And then you look at free agents or whatever. Sure, if all of a sudden the Vikings were going to give Sam Darnold away, let's have a conversation, I guess. But otherwise, I don't know. So I don't have a strong feeling on Geno one way or the other. I like him. I think that he's done the job fine. I don't think he's a firecracker in any way, shape, or form. But at the same time, it's you look at the options, I get a little nervous.
The Vikings aren't going to trade him. It would be asinine for the Vikings to trade him. They'll sign Sam Darnold. They'll have JJ McCarthy, and then they can decide next year if they want to do anything about that. JJ McCarthy's young enough. They can let him sit a year coming off an injury and develop. Mm-hmm. They're sitting on so much value. There's no reason for them to feel like they have to trade him this year. And I feel like there's a lot of situations like that. So the whole move on from Geno thing, that's another whole show we'll do. But I'm telling you, the options for we'll probably get at some of the questions. I think I might even have one here about Justin Fields. And I'm like, come on, people. You don't know what you're asking. But anyway, go on, Dayna. I know we've got more.
We have one more. And this one it's a good one. It's from Sam. It says, which team do you have the most faith will have long-term success? It's basically the NFC West, the Seahawks, the Rams, the Cardinals, or the Niners. Nathan, go first.
We'll have the most long-term success.
Long-term success. Mm-hmm.
Can we define long-term?
Well, he didn't define it. He didn't
give me a
I would
Dayna
say
definition.
Have the greatest success or the
most playoff wins over the next
most playoff
5
wins.
years.
5. I was thinking 5 years.
Okay, 5 years.
That good?
That's pretty long in the NFL. So yeah, 5 years. I think
that's long term for sure.
Considering the Seahawks won't even make it this year to the playoffs, I would feel a lot more confident in saying the Rams if McVay hadn't made noise about retiring a couple times already. Mm-hmm. So assuming that he doesn't do anything like that, I would say I think you have to give it to the Rams right now. But I do think that the Seahawks are. I don't know. The Niners are not out of the They had a bad year, but the Niners are not gone. They're not done. So I don't know. This is tough.
I think it's the Seahawks. I really do. I think that they'll have to figure out quarterback, but I don't think they have to figure out quarterback as fast as the Rams do. I think a really undertold story this year is Matt Stafford is cooked.
Yeah.
Like he's just not that good anymore. And he's 36. He's not going to get better when he's 37. The 49ers, totally agree with Nathan. If you look at like, it's still the most like top end talented roster, and that matters. And they'll probably be better next year. I think it's fair to think they might even be the division favorites next year going in. I think Trent Williams is done. And I think that team is not the same team without him. And I don't think they have a good replacement. And I don't think it's easy to find a replacement for one of the best linemen in the last 15 years. So I think that team's on the decline. And I think the Cardinals were the team that had all this draft capital, unbelievable, like barrels of draft capital. And somehow they still have one of the least talented defenses in the NFL that did okay, but got exposed over time. And I don't think there's a story to be told that they're like ready to take the next step. I think Kyler Murray is who Kyler Murray is, and they're not going to get out from under Kyler Murray. So I do feel like the Seahawks defense has a real good chance of being a top 5 unit next year. I think that's not a silly thing to say. And I think there's a pretty credible story that if they do manage to address the interior offensive line, they can be a top 12 offense. I don't think that's crazy at all. I really don't. So yeah, I think that I would put my money on the Seahawks. The Rams are probably the second. And that's mainly because I think they'll be probably the most aggressive to try to find a young quarterback. Like they might make some crazy trade first round picks. And if they happen to hit on somebody, then they're in a really good spot.
And they have a history of doing that, right? They'll sell the farm to get the cow, right? Like they don't mind that at all.
That's the other thing real quick about this whole trade for a quarterback thing. When you had Mike Holmgren as your coach, who has developed quarterback after quarterback after quarterback, and he goes and trades for Matt Hasselbeck, who's a backup in Green Bay and a later pick, then it's like, okay, he's going to figure something out. Who is the quarterback developer here that you say, yeah, just give us the clay and he'll mold him?
I was told that Ryan Grubb was a quarterback developer.
He's had done well over time. Gino's had his best statistical year in some categories, but I don't know that you can say for sure, like you're not adding him to a system that's clearly working. We just talked about that.
Yeah. That's it. That's just the 4 that we had today. So
awesome. Well, thank you, patrons over at patreon.com/hawkblogger. Thanks for supporting the show. You can sign up, and the off season is going to be great. We're going to have all sorts of stuff going on in the off season, so make sure you sign up there. We've got a couple more super chats to get to, and then we'll do our predictions and get everybody to bed. Hawks fan Matt Man says, do you think John Schneider's overdrafted and overpaid comment has been overblown at this point? What do you think he was most likely trying to actually say? I think we talked about what he was trying to probably actually say a little bit earlier. Do either of you think that it was overblown?
Can you think of a GM saying, like any other examples of a GM saying overdrafted and or some like something similar to that? That is such an incredibly strong statement for a GM to make, and like revealing. I feel like it's an odd thing for someone to just come out and be like, yeah, we don't care as much about offensive line as everyone. Like, oh yeah, that position, we're not in that as much as everyone else. Like that's just also like giving away state secrets a little bit. I mean, not that it's not a little obvious from how they operate, but so no, I don't think it's overblown at all. I think that's something that will and should stick with John until he proves it wrong. And it should stick with him right out the door when he continues to fail at fixing this problem.
Bold.
You know, the interesting thing with me is that I've been thinking about John Schneider a lot as people are like, he's got to go. And, you know, I'm not the only one that I have to say, I was like, you know what, maybe it's time for him to go. Maybe he's been here too long. Maybe he's bought into his own hype a little bit too much of all of this. And making a statement like that kind of proves that he thinks he's right and everyone else is kind of dumb, right? And so to me, that's the bothersome part of that comment. But I'm with Nathan. I think while it may get overused, I don't think the comment's been overblown. I think he meant it when he said it, and he kind of acts like it. So.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting, certainly a bet he wishes he hadn't said that. We've got his super chat from Richie Brash, who is like the out on Gino guy. He showed up on our People's Court arguing against Gino. He did lose the case to a absolutely brilliant lawyer, I will say.
Is this a Jalen Milroe guy, or?
He is a Jalen Milroe guy.
Oh,
Jalen Milroe
really?
equals Lamar Jackson. Richie, I'm outing you on that one.
Wow.
The emergency pod when the Seahawks trade for JJ McCarthy is going to hit so hard. LOL. Happy New Year's. Well, happy New Year's to you, Richie. We may not agree on some of your quarterbacks takes, but you're always welcome here. Gary Simonson, says, what makes you think Schneider could build an offensive line even if he wanted to? Over the years, they have actually spent a lot of draft capital under Schneider and the O-line and usually miss. I'll say this. I do think that saying he's missed on O-line is oversimplifying. I went through this on the show yesterday. Charles Cross, one of the best 2 or 3 tackles from the class that he was drafted in, looks like a quality player. Abe Lucas in the 3rd round, a good draft pick. This was just a couple of years ago. His first draft pick ever was Russell Okung and became a Pro Bowl tackle. Breno Giacomini was a good pickup at right tackle. Like there's been like Brandon Shell was even a decent right tackle for a season. Dwayne Brown was a good trade for a tackle. He's been good, relatively speaking, at the tackle position. I think his guard and center stuff reflects some of these things we've been talking about, that he just doesn't seem to. He treats it like he's treated the interior defensive line, where he signs a Colin Cole or a Tony McDaniel or an Ataba Rubin. Like, he's done it at Al Woods, and he's like, look at that, guys. We were spending like a couple $1 million on those are all great contributors. Sure, we can do that on guard. Plug in DJ Fluker, like plug in like Jamarcus Webb and Luke Jokel. And it's like, no, don't do that. So yeah, it's a strategy that hasn't worked. But I think the thing I will say the most that gives me confidence here is when the last time I think the Seahawks had as clear of a singular need on the roster was 2012, where it was like, we need edge rush. Like, we need pass rush in general. Like, we've got everything else. I'm not saying that this Seahawks team has everything else, but it is so clear that interior offensive line is the problem. And the coaching staff, the agony, listening to Ryan Grubb and Mike McDonald talk about the guard rotation and how, like, no, it's not ideal to have a guard rotation. Like, they didn't like it. There's no way that in that building they're not going to look at each other and say, dude, this is not okay. That's why, for me, I feel like there will be more focus than there has been in the past.
And so they're going to pass on the Fletcher Cox of offensive tackles to go find the Bruce Irvin of offensive guards.
Are you saying that well, yeah, this was 2013. So this was the Michael Bennett, Cliff Averill free agency.
Off
season
right.
that I'm talking about.
Gotcha.
That's what I'm talking about. Good question, Gary. Carter Morgan says, don't forget about the Rams O-line issues. Good point. They spent a bunch of money on offensive line and second round pick, and it hasn't gone so well for them. I think John meant right guard, not left guard, because they are valuable. Maybe. Dogzilla Monster, John Schneider was responding to a question about Damian leaving. Yeah, so I think the point there is, like, getting back to it, do you think Damian Lewis got a fair contract that you'd be happy to have him on? I assume your answer would be like, yes. For me, the answer is still no. I'm glad they didn't sign Damian Lewis to that contract. I'm probably the only Seahawks fan that feels that way, but maybe you guys feel different.
I think they could have brought him back and skimped on, like I was saying, some of the Pharaoh Browns of the world. And that
100%.
Yeah. But I mean, the guards get paid a lot. Like you're saying, like, you know, Damian Lewis and Leonard Williams, they are much closer in salary than they are on impact on the field. Like that's
exactly it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly it. Yes, I would be happy to have Damian Lewis instead of Noah Fant if that was my choice.
Yeah. Any number of tight ends that they could trade.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Well, let's do this as we close out. Let's do our predictions. I know it's a weird game, but we got to end with our predictions. Dayna, what do you want to see in this game? Like, is there anything that matters to you in this game other than obviously you want people to stay healthy? Anything that you'll like be happy to see if it happens in this game?
Health of course is number one. You don't want anyone to get hurt in a meaningless game, but I would like to see them, and people are going to disagree with me. I want to see them go all out. I want to see them beat the snot out of the backups, right? Like I want that finish to this season. I want them to go, what would it be, 4-2 in the division? If they, good to have them go 4-2 in the division. I want them to not be swept by a divisional rival. I want them to end on a up note. And to me, that is, we aren't holding back just because strength of schedule screwed us, right? Like I don't want that from them. So I would love to see that. And I know others probably just want them to just cruise along and be done with the season and go pack your stuff. I don't know. I think it would be a great note to go into the next season on that divisional, I hate to call it a high because you're still not getting the playoffs. So you know what I mean? So I think that would be really kind of nice to see. And just a functional offense would be fabulous. I guess that's all you can really ask for at this point.
What about you, Nathan?
I assume the Rams aren't playing anyone. Are they all?
I mean, they're not playing their starters, but we don't really know what that means.
Yeah.
I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo is one of the things that means.
The Garoppolo will play.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. That's going to be really weird to see. And would be not a lot of fun to lose to Jimmy G. What is the draft implications here? I imagine that they could lose 2-3 spots in the draft.
I don't think that they can.
I thought it was just one I read.
Last I checked, they were pretty much they're the last non-playoff team in the draft order. Like they're 18th right now. If they go to 10-7, and let's say, like I don't think if they lose and went to 9-8, I guess Cincinnati and Atlanta and Miami could all go to 9-8. But I think only one team. I think they could only move up one spot based on what I'm seeing. So it's 17 or 18, basically. Not a big draft implication. Okay,
and then I have another question. So I think JSN is 5 catches away from the Seahawk record, beating Tyler. How would you feel about him doing that in this year? I think that would be cool, but also it feels like a weird cherry on a crap sandwich type or crap sundae.
Doesn't bother me. What I care about more is that he finishes with exactly 1,190 receiving yards, because that's what I predicted he would finish the season with, and he is 1,121.
Oh,
I think I'm going to be pretty close.
So we need to get 5 catches for 70 yards or something like that.
Yeah. That's what I care about.
All right. I think Brian Grubb can do that. He can dial up those many screens for sure.
Nathan, it's going to be close because you predicted 1,150.
Oh,
so it's going to be one of the two of us.
All right. I need the old school, JSN averaging 8 yards a catch thing. Is what I mean. Yeah, all I care about is the predictions at this point. So whatever makes me look good there.
I think that's good.
Yeah, I think that's it. I really can't find anything to care too much. I just think that Jimmy G in a Rams uniform is going to look bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
He looks great in anything, doesn't he?
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Dayna. I'm going to need a little help if my prediction of Draymond Jones leading the team in sacks is going to turn out.
Oh, yeah. What is the standing there right now? What has he got? 2?
He's
3?
got 3. No, let's see.
And did they all come in the first 2 weeks too?
No, he actually had a good little run of sacks. He is at 4 sacks.
So very little win.
In my defense, he is number 4 on the team in pressures. So it's not bad. Wow. It's not bad. All right. So what do you guys think the final score of this game is going to be and who's going to win? Nathan, you go first.
I think the Seahawks will try to pile it on here, try to have a little bit of like something to say, hey, look, it worked. We can build on this. And I think the Rams probably couldn't care less. So I'll say 28-13 Seattle.
Dayna?
I'm sorry, I have a question. So if the Rams lose this game, it doesn't affect their seeding?
It does.
Oh, okay.
It does affect their seeding.
They don't care?
They're choosing to health over seeding.
Oh, well, with their team,
honestly,
that's really not a bad idea.
I don't think that's bad because I think there's pretty much tough matchups for them no matter what.
Well, fair. That's true. I too think that the Seahawks are going to win this one pretty handedly. I don't know that they'll get to like 27 or 28, but I think they'll probably get, I think it's going to be 23-14.
That's what my heart wants. But my head says the only logical way the Seahawks are going to end this season is struggling to beat the backups of the Rams and struggling to put up points. So I'm going to say 20-17 Seahawks. I think it'll be painful. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope that they win by a lot. I don't think it's out of the question that they will lose this game. That's not out of the question to me. I think that people underestimate sometimes how much backups love to use these as an opportunity to show out. And then you've got a team of starters who aren't really in it the way you're in it for a normal game. And you get the two of those things crashing together and sometimes weird shit happens. So I hope you guys are right. I hope it's going away. It would be a nice way to end the season. I would much rather. We were so close, you guys, to my ideal end of this season, which was have the strength of victory not decided by now. Mm-hmm. Have this game count. Have the Seahawks beat the Rams in a game that they were trying to win and then miss the playoffs and end the season feeling great and watch the Rams get destroyed in the playoffs. I'm like, give that to me. That sounds great. But I will take as a secondary option winning the last game of the season. That would be nice. It would be nice. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Oh, one last story, and I need to know what you guys what your take on this is. So Rachel's sister, my wife's sister, yesterday they were on a Zoom call, and she's like, "Oh, I think I saw a picture that kind of looked like Brian," and Rachel's like, "Oh, we should show it to him," and Rachel's like, he's pretty ugly. His teeth are all mucked up, but I'm like, I don't want to see this. Like, I don't need to see a picture you think looks like me that's ugly. So I walk out the door later that night. She's like, you got to look at this. And I'm like, fine. I look at it and it's like an atrociously ugly person with like jacked teeth and like terrible features. I don't think I'm like Tom Cruise or whoever your favorite is, but I don't need to see that. My statement to her was, you never show a picture to someone that you say you think looks like them that is a bad looking person. Am I right in that? Is that right?
Was the point that like, hey, this is what you would look like if you were super ugly, or
I don't know what the point was, Nathan. I don't know. Like to make me go to bed with tears in my eyes. I don't know. Aww. Like, no, I didn't have tears in my eyes.
No,
I have much more self-confidence than I reasonably should. But that was my take. I think she got annoyed with me that I was so annoyed about it. I was like,
but I guess what was the point? What was the point? Just saying, hey, someone looks like you. Like
look at this picture. Don't you think this looks like you?
Do you have the picture?
I don't, and if I did, I wouldn't show it to you.
Don't show it to Evan. No, but it's not. I would prefer to not see that too.
Do you have that where people are like, oh, you look like this person or this celebrity, and you're like,
I got the Andy Reid stuff a lot.
Right. Yes, right.
I'm like, well, I can't really argue, but I also don't love that. There's a picture my cousin sent me. It's Will Ferrell, and he's doing some like, I don't know if it's like if he was really doing it, but it's him commentating for some royal like event or something, and he's like, you look like Will Ferrell here, and he's got like a bald cap on, and I really kind of do. And when he first sent it to me, I was like, I don't think I like this very much, but the more that I've looked at it, the more it's grown on me, and I'm kind of into it.
I think there's way worse people to look like than Will Ferrell. Well, thank you for that validation. I needed that, and I appreciate it. It was so great to catch up with both of you. Dayna O'Gorman at Dayna OG on Twitter and Blue Sky. Nathan Ernst at Nathan E11 on Twitter and Blue Sky. I'm Brian Nemhauser. You know where to find me at Hawk Blogger and all the places. It's been great hanging out with all of you. We will be back tomorrow morning. Mike Sando will join the show for our Blue Fridays with Mike Sando. So see you then. Until then, have a great night. Hey folks, this is Brian Nemhauser. Thanks for listening to the show. Hope you enjoyed it. Want you to know that Real Hawk Talk is available on all major podcast platforms. Go ahead and subscribe. Have all podcasts delivered directly to your phone after each and every show. And then go ahead and leave us a 5-star review. It helps us out, gets more people to the show. Then, if you haven't already done it, go to patreon.com/hawkblogger and subscribe for just $5 a month. Gets you immediate access to our Slack channel. Join hundreds of folks in that community to talk Seahawks about wins, losses, and all things in between. Not to mention become eligible to win giveaways for Seahawks tickets and get to ask questions of the Real Hawk Talk crew every week on the show. Finally, if you haven't gone to hawkblogger.com recently, head on over. Tail the Tape morning after articles are there every week. Hoping to see you there. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for supporting the show. Go Hawks.